So, there's a war raging as we speak and as we sit here. And maybe there's always a war raging. But I want to talk about the resurgence in spectacular violence and overt warfare in Palestine and Israel and how we hold it at Naropa. And I would say for the graduates that this is just another mirror or model for how you, when you go forth in your life, how you hold and work with matters of conscience. I want to bracket my talk by saying that this is what I feel and believe and what I'm struggling with, and it represents my point of view. It does not necessarily represent the views of Naropa University. So it's in no way an official statement. So I'm going to wrap it around 4 words: complexity, compassion, courage, commitment. So complexity. In my time at Naropa, among others, I've had the task of holding space for student learning around issues of historical and ongoing oppression based on large-scale social identities like skin color, sexual expression, gender, socioeconomic class, ability, age, and so on. Central to this learning is the history and continuation of colonial violence and the expansion of Western Europe over the last 500 years and the ways that it set up the basic categories and vectors of power, violence, the direction and flow of resources, and even the borders and boundaries of nation states. This understanding is critical if we're going to have any grip on what's taking place in the modern world and understand the major fault lines in our society. We've spoken about settler colonialism, and it's made it possible for us to stand in this room. Okay, this campus is on a street that's named after the original peoples of this land, many of which were murdered when they were unarmed by the US government after they had surrendered. So settler colonialism has been used to describe what's happening now and for the last many decades in Palestine and Israel. Or maybe I should say, is it Israel or is it Palestine? The forcible displacement through violence, coercion, economic blackmail, cultural disruption, resource appropriation of one people by another. And on the surface, and from my limited point of view, being in a relatively safe place and a great distance from the danger, that's what it looks like. The central dichotomy of the oppressed and the oppressor has become a major conceptual and political tool, not only to understand our history and the repeated violence that erupts from its unhealed wounds, but a rallying cry for millions across the globe. Universities have played a crucial role in toppling other unjust regimes based on settler colonialism, such as South Africa's apartheid regime. It was student protest and pressure on administrations to divest that started the wave across the nation. And it was a boycott, and in a way it was the original, you might say, cancel culture, as in a withdrawal of all activity and support from institutions that practice systemic and structural racism and other forms of institutionalized violence. So the term settler colonialism goes back and forth over social media, and even though I hear scant mention of it in our major news media outlets. And oftentimes anyone that has a different view is instantly boycotted, canceled, love and attention divested. Some of you may be familiar with Van Jones' situation recently. I don't know if y'all saw that or familiar with Van Jones. You might check that out. So since the summer of 2020, I feel that we've reached some kind of threshold in our worldwide justice movements, and that the division between the oppressed and the oppressor, the colonized and the colonizer, of those harmed and those that are victim, while fundamental to our understanding of histories and patterns of violence and inequity, don't fully describe our social and political realities. Binaries and dualities are useful building blocks for thinking and conceptualization, but as we grow in our thinking, we come to see things in qualities. We come to see the complex net of causes and conditions that bring about situations and actions and ways of thinking for ourselves and others in the world around us. Second word, compassion. A few weeks ago, I attended a march in Denver calling for a ceasefire and for Palestinian liberation. There was a person there who wore a shirt, and the shirt said, "All monsters are human." Online, people have referred to Hamas, and not just Hamas, but Palestinians as a group, as monstrous, as inhuman, and their actions senseless, and that they should be bombed out of existence. They've been called barbarians, so on. And indeed, the actions of October 7th, when between 1,200 and 1,400 Israelis were killed, and nearly 700 of them were civilians, were monstrous. And since then, Israel's retaliation against Hamas, where there's an estimated between 11,000 and 17,000 Gazans that have been killed, and between 5,000 and 10,000 of them are children, and more are dying right now, it's monstrous. And what about us in the USA, who with our tax dollars send some $3.8 billion of military aid to Israel a year, with an additional $14.3 billion being requested right now? The scale of that is monstrous. And again, it's easy for me to say this from where I sit. I'm comfortable. It's easy for me to be here and condemn or not condemn when I'm not actually caught up in these cycles of violence. And I would ask you, what would you do to protect your family? What would you do to protect your own fragile body? What if you were the 21-year-old Israeli pilot with a hospital in the crosshairs? What if you were the 21-year-old soldier from Hamas who dropped over the fence and targeted civilians? What if it was your grandmother that had been pushed out of her home? What if it was your community that was stricken by poverty and your culture displaced for decades? How do you know that you're not the monster? And who do we identify with and why? Who does our heart go out to? Who do we rally for and who do we support with our tax dollars? Which conflicts get the media spotlight? Why do we identify with the brave people of Ukraine and not the brave people of South Sudan or Yemen? Or the children of the Democratic Republic of Congo? Sorry, people. Whose mining of rare earth metals makes the phones in our pockets possible and makes it possible for us to see all of these crises around the world? Is it because their eyes are brown and not blue? And what's our place here at Naropa in a space of relative safety? Historically, universities have been places where radical politics develop. Why? Not because, as some people say, that students are being indoctrinated, but because you have time to sit with the records of human history and understand the patterns of violence and the conditions that pressed people to make the choices that they did, as well as see potential alternatives. Because you come to know and to relate to people near and far and see what they're dealing with. We do that here. And we have something in our DNA at Naropa that makes us different from other universities. We have in our DNA Thich Nhat Hanh's true names. We're both the pirate and the kidnapped. We're the arms dealer and the person targeted by those very weapons. We are the leaders giving orders to drop the bomb, and we are the children under the rubble. In our DNA, we have a belief that everyone's basically good. And not just everyone, but reality. And that reality's whole and that it makes sense. In our DNA, we have this notion that the real radicalism in our time is compassion. It's the ability to see ourselves and others, and the ability to be identified with people in every condition. And we have the ability to relax our identifications. We have the ability to step back, to relax and interrupt our habits, to introduce gaps in space and silence into our thoughts. And we need this right now, especially those of us who are not in harm's way and who don't have family in harm's way. You know, we can't get caught up in the reactivity that's happening. You know, we've got this massive electronic nervous system that's sending images and thoughts and opinions around, and we can just get swept up in it. We're fighting a war that's more words and ideas, and it's like we're like in the same kind of situation as people were in the Vietnam era, where you can see on a street level like what warfare actually looks like and what the cost actually is. So we need to be able to step back from this reactivity, and we need to be able to step between it. How do we not just take one side? Israel has a right to defend itself no matter how asymmetrical the power or the scale of violence, or Hamas is engaging in resistance no matter how vicious and indiscriminate the action. Is Hamas an organization of freedom fighters or terrorists? Is Israel's state engaged in legitimate self-defense of its citizens or the genocide of a people? And it doesn't make me a traitor to criticize Hamas, and it doesn't necessarily make me anti-Semitic to criticize the actions of the state of Israel, unless, of course, it is. And sometimes it is. And there's been a real flare-up in anti-Semitism since October 7th, or after October 7th, and since the Trump administration. Maybe some of y'all saw that exchange involving Elon Musk. And so for me, this is part of where the complexity lies. Where the neat narrative of settler colonialism breaks up some. Jewish folks have been an oppressed people in the Western world, and they're carrying a recent and profound generational trauma. Anyway, this is how it appears to my ignorant eyes. So how do we hold all this as contemplatives and as a contemplative university? How do we break the stereotype of contemplatives as quietists, as those that do nothing but watch and wait? How do we hold the complexity, see the compassion, and still take a stand, or as we say here at Naropa, have a seat? How do we make a constructive step forward? Okay, I got two more: courage, and I know my time is stretched. Okay, so this brings me to courage. So I've had students ask me, why aren't we doing anything? Why aren't you doing anything? Where's the response to the faculty and of the university? And again, this is in light of universities' histories as places where, student movement has cost investment from social structures like apartheid. Even now, we have students calling for the school to divest from any dealings with the state of Israel and totally boycott Israeli corporations. And at the same time, we have students who claim that the use of language like settler colonialism in regard to Israel, the state of Israel, is uninformed, and that we're supporting anti-Semitic scholarship and that we should divest from it. And we also have Jewish students and faculty who have shared that they're afraid to speak their mind on campus. And we have students that are so unheard that they've felt the need to spray paint the walls to get their message out. And all that's happening on campuses throughout the nation. It's no special dysfunction of Naropa. As far as faculty response, maybe y'all felt like I have, like I didn't know enough, like I didn't want to say the wrong thing, or most deeply, staring at images of hell through my magic mirror at breakfast, that there's nothing I can do and that I'm powerless. So for me, the act of courage is to identify with the pain of the Palestinian people and the pain of the people of Israel, to accept the need for self-defense and the futility of cycles of violence. For me, courage is to recognize and lean into our uniqueness as a university. I think we are called on to help people not only to think and to know, but to feel and understand. To not only see the problems, but to envision ways forward towards greater life. We have an opportunity to evolve right now and move past the simple duality of legitimate nation, terrorist, oppressed, oppressor, and so on, in our teaching, in our scholarship, our practice, and our advocacy. We have a responsibility to advocate for fundamental human dignity, for the rights to people, to culture, land, language, respect, safety. We have the possibility to re-enliven a justice movement that goes beyond a fixation on targets and enemies, and that recognizes that the oppressed of today can be the oppressors of tomorrow, and that all of us have the capacity to break these cycles and become liberated beings. Finally, commitment. For those of you that are graduating, we've tried to provide you all with the space and the foundations to recognize and unravel the seeds of violence in your own mind, in your speech, in the built environment, right? In your families, in your communities, and be the seeds of sanity in your nations. We've hopefully given you all the space and the knowledge and the practices to match your mind with your heart with your body, and all of them, when all of them are aligned, that like radiance that just opens up out of people. So little by little, year after year, decade after decade, even centuries after centuries, because we're on a 500-year plan here, you all will unfold those capacities if you keep practicing. And over time, not just you, but all of us will be so sensitive, will be so tender, so lucid, so outrageous, so aware of our own darkness, so daring, so visionary, so connected, so woke, so awakened, so tuned in to what makes human beings thrive and shine, that monstrosities like this will become impossible. So that's what we're striving for here. That's where we are inviting you into as you leave and step back into your greater communities. And that's what y'all can do. What we did here, what we do here, bit by bit, you can take it out and do in your worlds. Okay, I'm going to close the portal. I'm going to invite you to close it with me. All right. I want to thank you for your time and your dedication. I want to thank you to your family and friends and faculty. And my time's up. Thank you.